Hello guys, how you doing? Hope you're fine with this coronavirus situation. Today's lesson is grammar, and we're going to see grammar unit 9, relative clauses and participle clauses, because these are the two topics that we're going to cover in grammar. In relative clauses, we use relative clauses to give additional information about something without starting another sentence. And by combining sentences with a relative clause, your text becomes more fluent and you can avoid repeating certain words, so it makes it shorter. Now let's imagine a situation. We have Tom talking to a girl, and you want to ask to a friend, who's that girl? And you can say maybe in a long question, a girl is talking to Tom. Do you know the girl? But as you can see, it's a little bit longer. And the main thing that you want to know is that if your friend knows about that girl. So the first part of this question is, do you know? Then, obviously, what you want to know, that it's about the girl. So the final structure that we can make up to this whole question of the conversation, to make it shorter, omitting certain words, and to make it simpler, it is starting with the main question, do you know? Adding up person, that is the girl, and becoming with whom is she talking to, that is Tom. So this makes a shorter question, that is, do you know the girl who is talking to Tom, instead of that whole sentence that is, a girl is talking to Tom, do you know the girl? So with this, we are checking that relative clauses make it shorter. Now, there are relative pronouns and relative adverbs that can help you to do the relative clauses. The most common, or the known ones, relative pronouns, the first one is who. And this one is used for subject or object pronouns for people. We substitute subject or object pronouns for people, only people. Like, for example, I told you about the woman who lives next door. Okay, in this case, the extra information is that she lives next door. The second pronoun clause is which. So it covers an object or a subject pronoun for animals and things. Like, do you see the cat which is lying on the roof? But it is also used to refer to a complete sentence, to a whole sentence. For example, in the situation of he couldn't read, which surprised me, the complete sentence is that he couldn't read. That's the one that we're giving the extra information about. Now, the third one is whose. This one is used for possession for people, or in another way, certain relationship between people. For example, do you know the boy whose mother is a nurse? So here they have a relation between them. Do you know the singer who's her favorite example? So this one is used for to complete that relationship between two people. The fourth one, whom. This one is also for people, object pronoun, only object pronoun for people, but especially in non-definite relative clauses, because in definite relative clauses we prefer who. I'm gonna explain you about the difference between them at the end of the topic, about non-defined relative and defined relative clauses. But in this case, whom, again, is for people, but object pronoun in non-defined relative clauses. For example, I was invited by the professor whom I met at the conference. So in this case, whom is the object pronoun about the professor. The last one of this category, that. This one is for any subject or object pronoun, people, animals, things, but in defining relative clauses where who and which are also possible. Okay? If you remember, I told you at the end of this slide, I'm gonna explain you about the difference between non-defining and defining relative clauses. An example of the use of that, I don't like the table that stands in the kitchen. Instead of I don't like the table that stands in the kitchen, or the one that stands in the kitchen, we also use that. Now, the second category, relative adverbs. There are only three. The first one, when. And this one is used, this means in which or on which, and refers to time expressions, minutes, hours, seconds, days, months, years. Doesn't matter, as long as it's a time expression, that's where we use the relative adverb when. For example, the day when we met him, instead of saying, do you remember that on February 2010 we met Patrick? That we say the day when we met him was very important. Instead of saying the whole sentence, we omit that part and we just only use when to define that specific time. The second one of this category is where. This one means in which or at which and refers to a place, any place, city, country, and also places like house, hospital, restaurant, school, any. The place where we met him, instead of saying we met him at the hospital because we're doing this there. Say the place where we met him is where we were doing this thing. So we try to shorten that part. And the last one, why. This one, its meaning is which and refers to a reason. Always remember, when we ask why, we have to answer with the reason of the question. And example, the reason why we met him. Instead of saying, this was a reason, blah, blah, blah. Instead of doing all that conversation that is so complicated, we just only shorten it to the reason why we met him. We don't have to give anything else because we assume that the other person understands or remembers. Now, this is the part. Defining and non-defining relative clauses. In this case, a defining relative clause tells which noun we are talking about. It tells you which noun we are talking about. We use who, which, and that. That are the most common for defining relative clauses. For example, I like the woman who lives next door. That was the first example that we saw on the first slide. If I don't say who lives next door, then we won't know which woman am I meaning of. So that's additional information for this sentence. And obviously, when we use which, when we use that, it also refers to the noun that we are talking about. A non-defining relative clause gives us extra information about something. We don't need this information to understand the sentence. It's only extra. It doesn't have like a complete importance. And in these cases, we use who and we use which. Example, I live in London, which has some fantastic parks. Everybody knows where London is. So which has some fantastic parks is extra information because everyone knows where is London. Okay? With this, we end up the first topic of grammar from Unit 9, relative clauses. Now we're going to go to participle clauses. Both topics are almost the same thing, but because they are used to omit certain details or to give extra information in a sentence, but both are related and you will see them when I explain it to you, okay? So just only remember relative clauses, who, which, that. for defining relative clauses, and who and which for non-defining relative clauses. Defining relative clauses tells about the noun that we're talking about. Non-defining relative clauses just only gives us an extra information, and it doesn't mean that we have to do. Now, participle clauses. If a clause is shortening using a participle construction, the clause is called participle clause. For example, watching TV, she forgot everything around her. We're just only saying what was the action of it. In English, participle clauses are mainly used in writing in order to put a lot of information into one sentence. With this, we're just only giving the situation that happened, that's the participle clause, and if you notice, these are some rules. When shortening or combining clauses with a participle construction, keep the following rules in mind. The first one, both clauses should have the same subject. They have to have same subjects so we can combine them. If they have different subjects, we just can't. The less important part becomes the participle clause. Important information should always be in the main clause. As in relative clauses, the main information is in the first form. Make sure you use the correct participle form that we saw in the previous slide. The conjunctions as, because, since, and relative pronouns who, which are left out. We don't use them. The conjunctions with, before, when are used in the participle clause. These are ones that we usually use. And the conjunctions after, while can be used or left out. It's our decision if we use them or not. Now, we have three categories in participle clauses. Present. This one can express an action that happens at the same time as the action in the main clause. Both situations happen in the same moment. Tom lost his keys walking through the park. We omit while. Do you remember the previous slide? Omitting while. It's the same sentence as we say, Tom lost his keys while he was walking through the park. It's longer. That's why we say Tom lost his keys walking through the park. She left the room singing happily. It's the same situation. Instead of saying she left the room as she was singing happily, we just only say the action of it. These are present participle clauses because they happen in the same time. Action and the action of the main clause and the action of the second clause, they happen in the same moment. Participle clause can come first literally style. That means in any kind of reading, poetry, role plays, books, any kind of reading has this kind of participle clauses. Walking through the park, Tom lost his. You can see these kind of sentences in books mainly while we're reading stories. Now, an action that happens just before another action is still being present participle clauses. Open the envelope, I found 2 concert tickets. That means that I opened the envelope and I found 2 concert tickets at the same time when I was opening it. So that's why it's present participle clause. The action happens in the same moment in both clauses. An action that is the result of another action. Okay. Moments later, a bomb exploded, leaving 3 people dead and 12 others injured. First, the bomb exploded, and then the people were dead and injured. And that's why the first action is that the bomb exploded, and the result of it is that there were dead people and injured. So we use present because it happened in the same moment, but one was the reaction of the action. And Also, present participle clauses are reason for the action in the main clause. Having nothing left to do, Paula went home. Knowing a little Russian, I had no difficulty making myself understood. Working as a sales representative, I get to travel a lot. The first action, the first reason of the action in the main clause, that is having nothing left to do, knowing a little Russian, working as a sales representative, made us do another action, and that's why we're using participle clauses in these kind of sentences. Because as Paula didn't have to do, she went home. As I knew a little bit Russian, I had no difficulty to have a conversation or make myself understood. So I travel a lot because I work as a sales representative. And in here, subjects of the two actions can be different. Remember the rule? They have to have the same. In this case, they can be different. The weather being nice, we decided to go for a picnic. The weather is one subject, and we decided to go for a picnic is another subject. Different actions, but they are related. That's why we're using participle clauses. Remember, this is the first part, and this present participle clause. Now, the second one, perfect participle clauses. These ones, if we want to make it clear that an action happens before another one, we use a perfect participle for the earlier action. Use this one when we want to make it clear. Having washed the car, I noticed a small scratch on the front right fender. That means that when I washed the car, then I noticed about the scratch. If I didn't have washed the car, I would never have noticed that it had a scratch on it. So that's why I'm making clear that the action that happened before the other. And in here, this present participle washing the car would mean while I was doing the action. Now, we continue with perfect participle clauses. If the two actions do not follow each other immediately, or if the first action happens over a period of time, we use this instead of present participle for the earlier action. Because why? One doesn't follow the other immediately. Okay, it happened a shortened period of time. Having seen the film before, I didn't want to go to the cinema. Maybe I watched the movie 1 year ago, 2 days ago, I don't know. But now I don't want to go to watch it again because I already watched it before. Mark knew the town well, having lived there all his life. Mark had to live there so he could know about the town. So that's why there was a certain period of time between one situation and the other. The third and last category of participle clauses, the past one. This one is used to replace passive voice infinite clauses. Shocked by the explosion, the people ran for shelter. First, the explosion happened, they were shocked about it, and the people ran for shelter. The musicians stood up, surrounded by thunderous applause. They played their instruments, and then the people obviously clapped to them, and they had to stood up because they were clapping. If you have noticed in the three clauses, there has been certain difference. The first one started with gerund and then the complement. The second one had a participle and the complement. This one is participle by and the complement. If we want to emphasize that an action happens before another one, we use passive perfect participle. Having been nominated for the Oscars, for an Oscar, sorry. He's one of the today's most acclaimed film directors. This is how we use participle clauses. Now, we saw that relative clauses. Now we finished seeing participle clauses. Now we're going to see how we can replace one with the other. Because if you remember the slide of the rules, we left out certain relative clauses. So, present participle clause can replace an active voice finitive relative clause. The noun before the participle is the doer of the action. The man driving the car was not injured. The relative clause would be the man who was driving the car was not injured. But the participle clause omits who was and leaves it with driving the car only to make it shorter even. And this, if you remember the rules, is present participle clause. Why? Because it has a gerund and the complement. Present participle clauses are possible even with verbs which are not normally used in the continuous forms. If you think you have received an email containing a virus, you should delete it immediately. If you think you have received an email which contains a virus, delete it immediately. The first example, the first one, is using gerund. So it changes to gerund in the participle clause. But this one used present verb and it changed to a gerund for present participle. A past participle clause can replace a passive voice feeling relative clause. The noun before the participle is its subject. This is the last photograph taken of my grandmother because this is the last photograph that was taken of my grandmother. So now, guys, thank you very much for watching this video. You can watch it as many times as you want. Remember, any question that you may have, don't wait until the last moment. This is grammar. It's a little bit tedious, and obviously it's a little bit longer. So any question, send me a mail to gabriela.barriga@udec.edu.mx or through Teams. And also, as this is the second video I'm doing for you, I would appreciate if you give me any feedback or suggestions that you would like to see in the next lesson. We will be practicing a lot to finish with this partial as proper as we can. Remember to always be taking care and practice. We have to practice. Remember to take notes, all the notes that you can, because they are going to count as signatures for the partial. Don't forget about it. I love you very much. Hope you liked the video. Remember, I'm not a professional. I'm just only me. So keep on practicing, keep on learning, and see you through Blackboard and through here. Bye, guys.